Hello and welcome everyone to the first of our 2024 webinar series, where we're talking to thought leaders of their respective industries and getting their input on how you change and work in L&D. Today, we're talking to Alex and Ivo, both from Voice, and they will tell us a little bit about the disruption blueprint of L&D. So very nice for you guys to be here. Thank you very much for joining me today and giving us an insight about what you guys are doing at Voice and how you actually facilitate those processes. But maybe before we jump right in, there's a little space for you guys to introduce yourselves so everyone knows who you are as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jan. And thanks very much for having us. We've been really looking forward to this. So my job is a disruptor, which means I am trying to inspire people to change the way in which they think and behave. And I work in a small team called The Edge. And we're basically like an entrepreneurial startup, but within a larger business. And our mission is to deliver disruption.
Hey Jan, first and foremost, thank you and the whole Retorio team for inviting us. As Alex said, we were very much looking forward to this. This is more or less the highlight of our week. But my name is Ivo. I'm a business analyst for Voice, and I've been working alongside Alex and the team of The Edge for about a year and a half now. So my job, or one of my aims, is more or less to make sure that the goals and strategies that Alex and his team set up, I try and help make into a reality. And we're very much looking forward to having this discussion today.
Sweet. Thanks again, guys, for being here. It's really a pleasure. Alex, you started by basically saying that you work with disruption and your aim is to create disruption. But maybe to start really bluntly here, could you get us an insight and like the background of what disruption means to you and to Voice in general?
Yeah, so disruption I describe it as radical change. So you've got innovation, which is all about looking at the existing way of doing things and trying to just do that a little bit better. But really disruption is looking at the existing way of doing things and throwing it away and saying, hey, let's do something completely differently.
Okay, that's really, really interesting. And why do you think this is so important, and why do you think we need disruption?
I mean, I always like to say that businesses are like caterpillars, right? And each business is wiggling along, trying to eat some leaves, and all the businesses are competing for the same few leaves. And there's only so much faster you can wiggle, as a caterpillar. And really, disruption is the art of turning yourself from a caterpillar into a butterfly, right? And when you're a butterfly, all of a sudden, you've got so many more opportunities. You're doing things completely differently. You can get 10 times further and find way more leaves that none of the other businesses even knew existed.
Oh, that's really interesting. So you basically say that disruption is changing from wiggling to flying, basically.
Yeah.
Nice. I really like this analogy because if you think about being on a tree and being on a leaf as a little caterpillar, like the time it takes to climb up that stem to just get to more luscious green leaves would take forever. You probably starve to death if you don't just jump from leaf to leaf. But
yeah, and that's what we see. You see established businesses do the same thing forever, and they slowly die out if they don't change things.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. But when you say we want to evolve from a caterpillar into a butterfly, how would we do that? Like, how do you guys do that, and what is the starting point of that process?
Yeah, so I mean, the starting point when it comes to disruption is to find an opportunity to change things. And that's exactly what Ivo and I did, right? We knew we wanted to change L&D, and we had a look at the L&D landscape, and we quickly realized actually there were hundreds of great solutions out there, right? Interesting training solutions, expert coaching solutions, and things like that. And it was around the time that Gen AI was just sort of starting. And so there were, these superhuman solutions with all sorts of capabilities that looked amazing. And I think the temptation is to just get carried away with all these great solutions. But what we decided to do actually was to remain very, very heavily focused on the problem that we were trying to solve. So we actually spent an awful lot of time at the start speaking and listening to lots of people within the business to really understand what their problem was, how they saw things, what really mattered to them. And it was really interesting because speaking to all of these people, we actually found out there wasn't really any problem with the way in which we're training and the content that we're providing people. Actually, the problem was simply that people never really had the chance to practice what they'd learned. And that insight completely reframed the way in which Ivo and I went about things. So all of a sudden, we started looking for AI companies that would allow our employees to practice. And that's how we found Retorio in the end. So really, disruption starts with having empathy and listening and understanding the problem. It doesn't always start just with the technology and the solution.
Yeah, that's super interesting, especially the part where you say you wanted to talk to a lot of people. The question that comes to my mind directly is like, how do you identify the right people, or like, how do you make sure that the problems you identify with a specific sample of people is applicable to everyone?
Yeah, so we always try and talk to lots of different types of people with different perspectives. And you hear a lot about, diversity and inclusion these days. But what you don't hear so much about is cognitive diversity, people that think very differently. And actually for us, when it comes to L&D, cognitive diversity is absolutely crucial, because the way in which you learn might be through reading a textbook, right? But the way in which I learn might be from listening to YouTube. The way in which Ivo learns might be from doing an interpretive dance or something, right? Everyone learns completely differently. And actually, what was great about when we found Retorio is it gave people the chance to learn in a whole new way, right? They got to learn through practice and through actually doing stuff. So again, we try and find lots of different people that think and have very different perspectives.
Oh, that's lovely, and I think this is exactly the right way to go on about it as well, because obviously everyone learns differently, everyone needs their specific way, and just by giving opportunities to learn in different ways, they often first figure out what they need to learn effectively, right? I can think back about my times in university where I thought, hey, I read things and then I learn them, until I actually found out about myself that the moment I actually present stuff and that I actively encourage the stuff to work with the information, that this is how I learn and how things stick with me, right? So I'm 100% with you that everyone learns differently and everyone needs their own individual approach. But at the same time, I can imagine that working and having the input of so many people, it is going to be hard to actually find out who you want to work with and how to implement solutions to these problems, right? Like, who do you go about that? Who are the people that you're implementing solutions with?
I think that's a great question, Jan. And if I may take this one and continue the discussion. So from what Alex said initially, so when it comes to our specific example, so we were able to identify the problem. We were able to speak with specific stakeholders who knew or were able to explain to us what exactly they wanted to be improved. But now we needed to dig a little bit deeper in terms of trying to figure out how exactly do we solve this. And neither me nor Alex are exactly subject matter experts in the area where we wanted to implement this solution. So we needed to identify a small group of stakeholders or champions, if you will. They will be able to provide us with the background or low-level information that we wouldn't exactly be privy to. And those people, they would be passionate and would share our same goals to make this into a success. A lot of times, not just in L&D, but in a lot of organizations, whenever there's a change, when there's a new initiative or a project, many cases it comes directly from the top, this idea, and it gets slowly but surely trickled down to the ground, to the people that actually need to implement said solution. But since it goes through a number of different communication flows, that idea eventually dilutes, and whatever the people at the top wanted might not be exactly what the people on the ground are trying to implement or create. So there's a little bit of a miscommunication in this side. People that actually need to implement said solution are confused as to how that would look like, what would be the benefits, and in a number of cases, this would turn out to be unsuccessful after 1 or 2 years, and the company would need to start from scratch. This is a pitfall that me and Alex were very we wanted to avoid at all costs, because we wanted this to succeed, because we saw the value. So we had more or less of a two-step approach when it comes to this, how we wanted to identify the right people and inspire change. First off, we wanted to get a relationship and potentially buy-in with the senior leaders, the people that will be making the go or no go decisions when it comes to our solution. The same people that can essentially block or mitigate any challenges or barriers that we might experience during the process. Those same people would also be able to connect us to the people on the ground. So the people, the trainers, the people from the quality team, as well as the people from an operational side that would actually be able to help us when it comes to the low level details of the solution. Again, that me and Alex would not be subject matter experts in. And in this case, there is also, I would imagine, an element of humbleness that needs to happen within all parties, because it's not going to be a case where me and Alex would be very well aware of how the ideal solution would look like. The same can be said from people from the senior leadership team and people from different areas that are on the ground implementing said solution. So what me and Alex were trying to and managed to succeed in creating was identify just a few champions from all of these different cross-portfolio teams and create a number of different workshop sessions where the voice of each participant will hold the same amount of weight, regardless of their position or area of the business. And I think that ultimately led to a lot of buy-in, both from a senior side, but people from on the ground as well, when it comes to this project and initiative. And that essentially helped us to pick up a bit more steam for us to start implementing the solution.
That's super interesting, especially the aspect of kind of breaking down the hierarchy in those workshops, right? And having all voices heard. But I can imagine that based on their proficiency and based on the stakeholder, everyone has slightly different ideas what they want to do with that solution and where they want to go, right? Like, how did you make sure that everyone kind of sees the benefits for their own slightly individual problems?
That is a very, very good question. Thanks for that, Jan. So the first way that we initiated this is we started with what we would like the outcome be. So we wanted basically the training to be enhanced. We wanted it to be easier for the trainers. We wanted for the trainees to have a better experience, to come out more knowledgeable, more confident in their skills. And I think once we were able to set a middle ground that every single party agreed on, then we were able to start building the blocks. And if we had some disagreements, that would be fine, because we still have the foundations. We can build one or two blocks and we can tear them down. That's fine. But the foundations were solid. And eventually we would get the right sequence of processes and ideas together. And I think that's how we did it.
Sweet. So first, if I can rephrase and if I understood correctly, first we look at the problem as a whole. We try to identify what our problem is that is really at each kind of level of our organization. Then we assemble a team also with stakeholders from all of these little teams and bigger teams from all kind of levels of the hierarchy. And then we tailor also the solution to each little facet of the problem per stakeholder, so that everyone kind of sees the value for themselves and for the whole team as in general, right?
Precisely, yes. And in enabling this, everybody's voice can be heard, everyone's input can be heard and considered as well. And I think that's what was quite useful for these experiments and exercises that we had.
I think so too, and I can imagine that a great teamwork also evolves from that, right? Where everybody is invested and everybody wants to fight for the solution. That's cool. So in general, we identified a problem and we put together a team that we want to use to implement the new solution. But how do we get started? What is the next steps? How does it actually then come to life, so to say?
Yeah, so this is the bit where things get tricky and lots of projects fail, right? Because often people have really great ideas and they set things up really, really well. But the challenge is actually to turn that idea into something which is powerful and influential in the business that you're in. So there's a lot too much focus on the idea sometimes and not enough focus on the execution of the idea. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we actually deliver change now. So the way to think of it to start with is like a tiny snowball. Our project started off as a small snowball, and to make matters worse, we weren't even pushing the snowball downhill. We were actually pushing the snowball uphill to begin with. So there are people that doubt it. There's a lot of resistance. There are processes which make things take far too long. You're relying a lot on volunteers at the start. So change often starts off very slow and very messy. But Ivo and I persevered for a few months, and we had enough users. We had sort of 50, 100 people using it. And it was basically enough for us to create a credible business case. And again, this is another point that I think people have a misconception, because it's tempting to think as long as I've got a good business case, that's fine. But actually, it's not just about what you say in the business case, it's about who you pitch the business case to and also how you pitch it. So we spent a long time trying to work out who the perfect person would be to pitch this to and how we were going to position it. And actually what we did is we recognized that the people that benefit from good L&D, right, isn't necessarily L&D itself, it's the business. They're the ones that get the benefit of employees being more skilled and being more proficient. So we actually chose to pitch our business case to someone in the business itself. And the way in which we pitched it is, rather than just going to them and sort of begging for money, what we decided to do is to take them on a journey. So we said, hey, we've got something really, really good here. And it's an opportunity for you to be a leader when it comes to AI. And it's an opportunity for you to really make a name for yourself if you invest in this. So we basically positioned it as something, that's, we're on a journey. Do you want to come with us? And we found that to be a much more compelling way than just going in and sort of begging for their investment. And so, yeah, the thing that I often like to keep in mind is that established practices, so everything around you that you call the business, right? These are just, at one point, were experiments, and they just happen to work out. If you trace back everything far enough, at one point it was just a small snowball, and that's what I like to keep in mind. That's what makes me feel more confident.
Yeah. So do I understand correctly that during the implementation process, you said it was a small snowball that we pushed uphill? Do I understand correctly that there's also some kind of organic growth in terms of the team that supports you and the way how you build this whole process up?
Yeah, so it will get to a point where it starts going downhill, just like the image on the screen, and it starts really picking up its own momentum. I think the challenging thing is it's very easy to connect the dots backwards and right now to look at when that point was. But when you're in the moment, it's very hard to actually recognize. So you almost have to overcompensate and make sure you keep pushing until you're absolutely sure.
Interesting. And we now talked about a lot. We talked a lot about the theory and how we create those processes, right? So we talked about how to fall in love with the problem and really understand it on a deep level, then building up the whole team, and afterwards starting small and pushing through until we actually reach that tipping point where the snowball becomes more like an avalanche already, that just like picks up itself and grows by itself. Can you guys give us a little bit of an insight how specifically that worked in your case, or in our case, in this case, how we made those things come true and how the process looked for us?
Yes, I can take this one, Jan. So I'm going to go through on a very high level how our current snowball looks, where it's no longer that small snowball, where it was just one or two people creating it and pushing it uphill. Now, as Jan said, it's gotten significantly higher. Initially, when we started this process, we had only a few people working on this. Retorio were very helpful with us when we were creating the initial scenarios. When we created those initial scenarios, we were testing them out ourselves. But again, we didn't have the background knowledge or information. But we had one or two champions teams, such as from from the trainer side or from the quality team that helped us develop these scenarios more and more. And eventually we had more and more people trying this out, not just people from the ground team, but actually the people that we designated this solution to be.
Yeah.
Slowly but surely, we have for the more scenarios created up to the point where we have about 10 full training programs that have been made so far, with the goal for us to increase those as we go on with these projects and experiments. Just in the last 5 or so months, we've been able to create 14,000 videos, 14,000 video recordings. That's pretty much 14,000 different scenarios that each of the new joiners were able to try by themselves. This, in turn, has led to us increasing practical training by 35 times. So what exactly does that mean? That means if I join the specific area where we've implemented our solution as a new joiner for the same amount of time, I would be able to practice what I've learned 35 times more than I have in the past. That would mean that I will be set up for success significantly more as opposed to in the past. I'll be more confident in my skill sets. I would be able to identify some of my development points earlier on into the stage, and I would have had more time to work on those. And we're just looking to expand this as much as possible. So now it's a point where the snowball has picked up a lot of steam. It has developed a lot of momentum, and we're just watching it grow and grow.
That is lovely, and I think from our perspective, as the guys that work together with you, I can just like sign off on that 100%, right? And I think from my perspective, the tipping point where it actually evolved into an avalanche is where we saw that the project team that was responsible for implementing all of these new trainings actually got to a point where they were so motivated that they did way more than we expected them to do, and they just kept on going to a point where there was no top-down steering involved anymore. So I think this was really the tipping point where it started to roll down, where everyone of the stakeholders that we mentioned before saw the value of that, right?
Indeed, precisely. And I think now that it has developed to the point where it is, we have seen more engagement from other teams, from other areas of the business, asking, how did you do this? Can we try this solution out? What would we need to do to get to the same stage as you are? So this has not only helped with our solution, but we're now trying to look at helping other teams within our organization based on the learning points that we've managed to develop, me and Alex, with this.
That's really lovely to hear, and I believe that with that mindset that you have, you guys will grow quite a lot as well, and I think the project itself will grow way more than where we are at this moment. But looking back at everything that we talked about so far, if you would have to break down all of those things into 2 minutes, and there are people out there, L&D leaders, they're listening to us and they're thinking on how can I relate everything that they said to my specific situation. I have a stuck situation in my company. We can't really change the status quo anymore. How do I go along that? What would you tell them broken down into 2 or 3 points to really give them the push and give them the confidence to change something?
Mm-hmm. The first one would be absolutely fall in love with the problem. Try and understand as much as possible. Try and get a number of viewpoints, if possible, for you to be as close as possible to an expert in this as you can, because this would essentially help you to have more constructive and detailed conversations along the line. So do your homework as early as possible when it comes to this. The second one is try and identify the right people. You know the saying that the way you would eat an elephant, you would start with one bite at a time. You would not be able to do that by yourself. You would need to have a number of people working with you. So identify the right stakeholders. It doesn't have to be a lot of them. They don't need to be subject matter experts either, but they need to share the same visions and goals with you, and they would help push the boat alongside with you. And the last one is afterwards getting it started. you've identified the problem and you have the people. So now it's a point where you need to start pushing towards a solution. And whilst you're doing that, I would also say for you to try and be flexible, because the initial idea that you might have might not exactly be the final solution that you have. Be open to change throughout the start up until the end of the implementation of the solution or
I
the
think
project.
I just want to add that you mentioned confidence, and to me, confidence is all about your mindset. And I think an unconfident person will say that history has already happened, but a confident person will say history is in the process of being made. And that's really our approach. We're thinking, how can we change things from where we are today?
That is lovely. So looking back, what did we learn today? We want to not just stay a caterpillar, but we want to evolve into a butterfly that pushes over our snowball to become an avalanche, to create the future rather than to look back on it and dwell on it. And I think this is quite a nice summary to our talk today, guys. Thank you so much for joining me and letting us in on your processes internally and to your thoughts on how to actually engage change and how to make it happen to disrupt the industry, to disrupt L&D.
Thanks, Jan, and apologies for all of the metaphors.
Yeah, we really do like a good metaphor, me and Alex. But thank you so much again for the time and allowing us to share our insights with you and everyone else.
Thank you again from my side as well, guys. It's always lovely to talk to you. And for everyone that's listening right now, obviously it would be great to hear your input. Write it in the comment section. Send us an email. You can always reach us. You can always reach me through jan@retorio.com. You can find all of our socials on the screen right now. Please stay up to date with us because there's a webinar series starting from now on. The next webinar will be in May. So stay connected, look at us, and then join us next time when we again talk to thought leaders of the industry and hear their thoughts on how to disrupt their current work. Thank you so much for joining. Talk to you guys soon. Thanks, Alex and Ivo.